LT.
I'm gonna go next.
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Sorry.
Test, test, test. Am I on the?
Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
And welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Back to the Father here on all the Guadalupe Radio Network social media sites. I'm Dave Palmer. Thanks so much for joining us as we focus during this 1 hour every Friday at 1 o'clock Central Time on some particular teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas, or, as is the case today, on something related to St. Thomas Aquinas. And I want to thank you for joining us. If you come every week, you know that I've got two in-studio guests that we all like to kind of bounce things off of. And also we rely, appreciate, and are very grateful for any comments that you make, either by calling us, 877-757-9424, or you could also comment on any of the platforms that you're watching this program on YouTube or X or Facebook as well. So if you're with us now, let us know who you are, where you are. Maybe you're a first-time viewer of this. Also, I encourage you to join our email list. You can email backtothefather@grnonline.com. That'll go to me and it'll go to Sissel, and we'll send you reminders every week about the topic, and also that when we're on, and send you a link so that you can easily get on the show every Friday. All right, so today the topic is existentialism, anxiety, and alienation. And I know that sounds kind of depressing, but it's basically looking at, there is a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of alienation in our culture today. What's going on? Why are people so alienated from each other in an age when we should be so connected, and social media and technology keeps us so connected? And why is there so much anxiety? Okay, are you anxious? I'm going to ask Sissel and William that question here in a second. And are we an anxious people right now? And is there perhaps philosophical roots to that anxiety? And perhaps getting back to a more pure, simple, and better philosophy might help culture to get back better on track and not be so freaked out all the time. All right? So that's the program. And again, if you want to call in at any point during the show, 877-757-9424. 877-757-9424. So I want to introduce our two in-studio guests, co-hosts, students. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know how to identify. Children of God. I like that. Yeah. So two children of God. And another one there in James Jacoby running the board as well. So Sissel, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty well. Yeah, it's been a pretty nice day. The weather here in North Texas has been rainy, a little humid, but still more fall-like. We're about to get more cold weather. Yeah. And it's been a while since I've been on the show. It's been a couple weeks, I think, because I think the last time we had a show before we went to Alabama, it was my garage sale weekend, and I wasn't here.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I get so lost on the shows. 5 in the morning,
shoving stuff into my driveway.
So, and in fact, you and I have been on very few shows the last 2 months, because there have been 2 that I haven't been here.
That's true.
And there's been one that you haven't been here, and of course there's been some that we missed altogether. The only stability to this show is William. I mean, he's the guy that shows up every week, right?
Is it actually William's show?
Yeah, or maybe he just doesn't have as much going on in his life. He's got a much more boring life. He's able to show up every single week. So, nice opportunity to introduce you to William Kirkendall, who is our wonderful high school intern, homeschooler, 18 years old, senior in high school, and a pretty bright guy, I might say. So, William, how are you? Good to see you.
Oh, I don't think your mic's on.
Your mic's not on.
He's on mic number 3.
All right. Okay.
1 second. All right, he should be on now.
All right, yeah,
there
I'm doing.
He is.
I feel like I'm in a cage. I need to just somehow get this
these mic arms.
You
gotta do it off to the side
there.
like this.
Okay, all right. So, all right, let's take 2 here. William Kirkendall, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Busy life as usual. Like you said, I probably don't have as much to do as you guys do, but still relatively busy with school and all that stuff.
All right. So on a scale of 0 to 10, and I'll ask all the people out there watching as well, 0 being you're just chill, no, not a concern in the world, 10 being like I'm this close to needing to be in the emergency room, I'm so stressed out. Where are you in life?
I would have to say probably 4.
4? Okay. 4. Sissel?
I'm going to say a solid 4.79.
So
I don't know. It's right at this very second.
Yeah.
Very low.
Okay.
Stress.
Oh, very low.
Very
does this show calm you?
Not necessarily, but or maybe it does because I don't. Maybe it does because I just don't. I'm like, I don't know half the time what we're talking about until I'm very.
That takes some stress off you, doesn't
yeah,
it?
exactly. So I'm just vibing.
Like if I'm in like a nuclear physicist convention, and I'm just like, there's no pressure on myself because I have no idea what
like,
anybody's talking about.
Like I'm not stressed about like,
yeah.
oh, I got to
Now,
get these
if they
notes
ask me to
down.
be on a show with them,
yeah, that
could
be problematic.
That might add the stress,
yeah,
so.
I'd say there's, I think anxiety and stress kind of comes and goes in life. I think I was a lot more of an anxious kid than I am an adult.
Yeah, so a couple things I wanted to report on before we get into the topic, and I think this is an interesting one because existentialism is interesting, but also can be problematic, especially where it has gone in the last 50 years or so. But a couple of things I was encouraged about. Yes, 2 days ago, Wednesday, Steve Gleason was doing his A Life Lived Joyfully, and he asked me to come on and talk about the 5 proofs of the existence of God. And so I got on, and he and I were talking, and I said, hey, how about if we open up the phone lines and see if any of our listeners, any of the 5 proofs? And immediately we got 3 calls. I mean, just like that. I mean, it was like instantaneous.
All because of Back to the Father. I know.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I do that, but it shows that there's some interest out there.
Oh, for sure.
And so people, there was one call from San Antonio and one from Houston, one from Pensacola. So there's some interest out there in philosophy, I know. And the other thing that was encouraging is that for the 5 of the last 6 weeks, I've, at the invitation and permission of the pastor at St. Joseph Parish in Waxahachie, I've gone down there and done an adult education class teaching the Summa in 5 weeks, the whole Summa. And
what are we doing the show every week then? Like you can do it in 5 weeks. I say we call it a day.
5 and be done with it, right?
Right.
So and it was very encouraging because people kept showing up and there was interest, and a lot of older people seemed to have interest. And so anyways, I was very thankful to Father James and also to the people there at St. Joseph in Waxahachie for coming out. I really did think when I did the first talk that it was going to be like by the 5th one, we'd be down to like 3 people, but the crowd,
you didn't scare them away.
The crowd stayed pretty stable, and I kind of learned as I went along, how much is too much and how simple to make it and all that. So that was pretty encouraging. So let's get into the topic. And again, thanks for joining us. We will close out the show with some trivia. I think I have a pretty interesting one to challenge Sissel and William about. So, all right. So what is existentialism? Okay. Sissel and William and I were talking about the fact that I think we may have, is everything okay behind the scenes? What is going on here?
I was trying to adjust
The cameras are all going crazy.
No one can see it because I changed it to Dave's camera. I was trying to adjust William's camera, and I knocked almost everyone's camera over.
Yeah, mine just got almost knocked over as well.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was just trying to get this a little closer to William because your hands were getting into your shot.
Sissel, you'll have to put that in the YouTube shorts.
That's going to be
Yeah, get 1 million views.
Yeah.
Cameras being knocked over. All right,
Sorry, guys.
so I think we've talked about existentialism before, so I'm going to put you 2 on the hot seat and say, I have an official definition of it here that I got off the dictionary, but what is existentialism? What do you think it is? And if anybody out there is watching and you want to take a stab at it, then let me know what you think it is as well. So what is existentialism? And if you don't know, then I'll feel good because it's like, okay, then we need to talk about it. If you're like, oh yeah, okay. So do you know what it is?
My mom actually asked me in the car because she sometimes asks what topic we're talking about on these Fridays. And I said, we're talking about existentialism. And she said, okay, so what's that?
So she didn't know?
I think she knew. She was probably just testing my knowledge.
Didn't want to show off.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said very broadly to her, I said it's essentially a philosophy that decouples from tradition. It kind of puts more on the self. It kind of turns the individual into a god. And then she added stuff onto that. But
yeah, I'd agree with about 90% of that. I don't think existentialism in and of itself turns the individual into the god. I think some existentialists will take it there, but like the first existentialist, people generally regard to be Soren Kierkegaard, who was a very, very strong Christian. In fact, his whole philosophy was on Christianity, and so he would certainly not say that he turned himself into a god. Mm-hmm. But everything else you said, I think, is very accurate, is that it is very much about the self. It is about, like if you look at the Summa Theologia, it's, Thomas probably used the first person pronoun about 3 times in the whole thing. He wasn't talking about me, St. Thomas Aquinas, and my experience in the world and how do I come to know God. He's laying out kind of a system, generally speaking, okay, where a person can take this and learn about the faith and, better understand God. But it's not like you said, it's not, like from my perspective of how I'm seeing the world. Existentialism tends to be very individualistic, where, how am I feeling right now as opposed to Cecil and William and James? Okay, what is my experience? Forget what you guys are feeling, right? But what am I experiencing? What am I feeling? What am I coming to know? And so in that sense, it can be a little bit selfish in a sense. It can lead that way. And it could also, I think, lead to what your final point was, is that it could end up putting yourself in the place of God, which I think is what actually happened. And when you hear about Jean-Paul Sartre, you'll see that that's basically what he did.
Right. Okay. So would you contend that the theory of existentialism essentially may not have been entirely bad, but it's only when people put it or make it practical that it becomes something bad? Or would you say that the philosophy when it was created was a bad theory?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's like inherently bad.
Okay.
There's Martin Heidegger who we're going to talk about. He had this thing where he was talking about being, he has this interesting terminology where he calls about thrownness. Of course, it was a German word, but the English translation would be thrownness, where you're thrown into the world. You don't ask to be born. You don't ask to have your parents who they are and your siblings, and you don't even ask to be born in the city that you're born in, but all of a sudden you find yourself there, And Heidegger, I'm very interested in reading him. Although he was an atheist, he ended up being a Nazi, and he was like a Nazi, and so he didn't end up so well. But the whole idea of most of us think about these things, like what's my purpose? What is being? Why do I exist?
Right.
But I guess the point is, and I think this is what Leo XIII, although he would not have been familiar with Heidegger because he wrote in 1879 and Heidegger died in, I think, in the 1940 or so. But is that if you don't have a compass of God and you don't have a realization that I came from God and I'm going back to God, if you plug existentialism into that, then I think it's fine, because I just kind of want to know about who I am and
questioning is not the problem.
Yeah, and even looking at yourself and why I exist. But if it's not rooted in some kind of like God-centered explanation, then you're going to be lost, right? So anybody out there, if you are watching and you have any comments on this, and wouldn't it be great to have a phone call today? 877-757-9424 if you want to call in as well. So here's the official definition of existentialism, at least the one that I pulled up from an internet search. It's a philosophy that emphasizes the existence of individuals as free and responsible agents determining their own development through acts of their wills. Now, that definition has no reference to God. It's very self-deterministic. It's like I'm, through an act of my will. And I think that's kind of more of a negative definition of existentialism. But I do think it can tend to lead to anxiety because pretty much all of the existential philosophers, even Kierkegaard, had a very like an anxiety about them as they're trying to figure things out, right? Even Kierkegaard, who was a Christian, he's still, I'll tell you some of the titles of his books, and they're clearly where he was pretty anxiety ridden, right? The other thing that I kind of came to know that made me interested in this topic is that Karl Marx, when he wrote his Communist Manifesto, he very much zeroed in on the idea of alienation. And this is one of the things that he capitalized on was the alienation of the working class, where especially in the industrial age, and you can have a certain, if you don't have a good, working environment, and the division of labor isn't, nice, and the people who are on the top of the chain are not, treating the workers properly and respecting their dignity, there can be a real sense of alienation, and he had this whole, idea. It's very actually Marx is very interesting. I don't know if you've ever read some of his stuff, but
I don't think so. No.
Where the the theory of surplus labor, and where let's say the workers make something and it has a certain value. Let's say they make something that's worth $1 million, a whole bunch of stuff. Well, then, but only $400,000 actually comes back to the workers. Well, that other $600,000 is going to people who didn't actually make it, and so that's at the top. And so Karl Marx realized that this alienation is something that he could capitalize on, the alienation of the worker, and that was kind of the foundation of the Marxist revolutions that happened around the world and, of course, are still pretty prevalent today. Mm-hmm. And I think it also would play into things like Antifa and BLM, where those movements are based on alienation. They're based on people who do not, there's not a sense of coherence or of like they're not fitting in. They feel alienated from the culture. They want to fight back. I mean, would you all agree? I mean, why whenever there's a little bit of instability in the country, it's kind of like where do these people come from? I mean, all of a sudden you've got the streets filled.
Just waiting for the moment to come out and do something crazy.
Yeah.
And I think about okay, we haven't had those kind of riots and all that kind of stuff in a couple of years. It's like, what are these people doing? I mean, are they just kind of waiting in their basement for the next riot? I mean, but it's clearly there's an alienation and there's an angst, there's an anxiety. So I would say that you could tie that into philosophical trends, especially when it comes to something like existentialism. Okay, sure. So that's what I'm going to try to kind of point out today as we go through existentialism. So any other comments or any thoughts?
No, I don't think
okay.
No,
I don't think so.
I got no thoughts.
All right. And James, you can always jump in if you want to as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to cut to the very chase. And we are going to talk about Jean-Paul Sartre, Sartre. And he was the most famous of the existentialists. He only died in 1980, so this is a guy that
is pretty modern.
Is pretty contemporary. And Peter Kraft, whose book I'm going to quote from here, was not a fan of Jean-Paul Sartre, as you can see. But let me, I read this on CDT this morning, and you'll kind of get a sense of the significance of Jean-Paul Sartre and also just kind of a strange guy that he was. So Peter Kraft, in his book, Socrates' Children, says this about Jean-Paul Sartre in the opening paragraph. He quotes historian Paul Johnson, who says, "Certainly no philosopher in the 20th century had so direct an impact on the minds and attitudes of so many human beings, especially young people all over the world, than Jean-Paul Sartre." Okay, so in this historian's opinion, Jean-Paul Sartre had a bigger impact on the culture than perhaps anybody. And that's saying a lot.
That is saying a lot.
Okay. And that's somebody, and I tend to agree. I think people give, music and authors and literature a lot of credit and movie stars and that kind of stuff. But I think when it comes down, it's philosophers.
It's all influenced by philosophy, I would contend, the culture and everything.
That's what's weird is that I bet most people today would never be able to tell you that. They have absolutely, most people will have no idea.
Yeah,
so they're not going to be like, I know I'm acting this way because
I know
this philosopher,
But when we go into this, now this is the next sentence, okay? So he's saying that nobody had as great of an influence as Jean-Paul Sartre. But now listen to this. And then he goes on and says, "Yet the thought of no major philosopher has ever been so nihilistic, pessimistic, and insulting to the dignity of mankind." And then Peter Kraft says, "What conclusion do you come when you put those two premises together? That he was the most influential, he also was the most pessimistic, he also
most
was
negative.
The most. He had a famous line where he said, 'Hell is other people.'" Okay, hell is other people. He hated people. So it says here, Sartre was a child, and I know I'm going back from Sartre and Sartre, but I'll just stick with Sartre, okay? He was a child genius. He was totally spoiled as an only child. His father died when he was 1, and his mother doted on him. Sartre said of his father, quote, "If he had lived, My father would have laid down on me and crushed me. Fortunately, he died young. Okay? Okay, so...
Wait. Is he saying that he would have been much more strict than his mom was being? Is that what he's saying? That he would have gotten a much less charmed childhood with his mom doting on him? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know how to exactly interpret it, but I thought...
That's very graphic, vision.
Well, the other thing about the existentialist writers is that they're amazing. I mean, like Nietzsche... Kierkegaard, Sartre are amazing writers. They're like gripping writers. I mean, Sartre was a very bright guy. So now, so he said that about his dad. All right. And then he also, he said his definition of progress was that long and arduous road which led to myself. When he became a school teacher, he used the same philosophy with his students. Total permissiveness, no grades, no tests, no rules, no responsibilities. Okay, that's what he did. Can you imagine being in a class, no rules, no tests, no assessments, no responsibilities. You just do whatever you want, because that fits into his philosophy, right? Now listen to this. He was short. He was 5'2", frog-faced, ugly, and with a grotesque-looking crooked eye. He was habitually dirty and seldom bathed. He wrote that he became a seducer of women to get rid of the burden of my ugliness. He picked quarrels with all the men he ever met. Nonetheless, women fawned on him, and he seduced many of his students whom he taught. At his funeral, 50,000 adoring young people, mostly women, followed his body to the grave, one of them falling into his coffin. Okay, so...
Okay.
Wow.
So make sense of this. He extolled violence and terrorism. He encouraged black people to shoot Europeans. He had himself photographed with African and Asian dictators, called Castro's Cuba a direct democracy. He praised Mao Zedong, the greatest mass murderer in history. He was extremely popular in France, especially among young people. Mobs attended his abstract technical lectures. Women fainted. Furniture was smashed. The press loved him. Everybody loved him. So isn't this crazy? I mean, this is a guy, hell is other people. He hated people, okay? His central insight, vision, or big idea that animates all of his writing is what he called absurdity or the absurd. What is the meaning of life, according to Jean-Paul Sartre? Nothing. The meaning of life is nothing, but the meaning and values we freely and arbitrarily choose to give it. And all these meanings are unjustifiable by anything other than our own free choice to invent them. Okay, so there's no rules, there's no regulations, it's only what we create. Okay, can you imagine how chaotic that would be?
Yeah, it's
everybody making up their own rules.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see a breaking, big time, from the ancient philosophers and the medieval ones who say, the big point of life is to seek for happiness and contemplation. That's what we're trying to get to here on earth, and then even more than that, get to happiness and contemplation in heaven. But from what you just read, that's not what he went way down on the opposite spectrum. It literally said nothing. He didn't care about anything.
Yeah. His main point is that there is no meaning or purpose. There's no logos to human life. He practiced what he preached, that life is only speaking, not listening. Okay. His most famous book was called Nausea. He did not believe there's any such thing as being. Okay. Heidegger wrote a whole book about being. Okay. That was he. And then he was an atheist. My existentialism is nothing else but an attempt to draw the full conclusions from a consistently atheistic position. God does not exist, and we have to face the consequences of this, he said. All right. Are you charmed by Jean-Paul Sartre yet?
Okay. Yeah, he seems like a real
James
bro.
is saying no.
Yeah, he's like, please no.
but why would he be... Now, you also have to put him in the context of when he lived. Okay, he lived, in a time. He gained popularity after World War II. The bomb was dropped. When you wake up one day and you find out that 2 cities in a country just got annihilated by a bomb, you start to think a little differently. You start thinking that maybe life doesn't have any purpose. Where some country could drop a bomb on me and I could be annihilated, in 10 seconds, right? So you have to kind of understand the psyche of what's going on.
Sure.
And then the Vietnam War, and It's everybody always thinks, the time they're living is the worst, and we tend to think like right now it's just horrible, but
It's kind of always been this way.
Yeah.
I think the only difference is that nowadays, I think why we always think that things are so much horrible is that we can know about it so much faster. We know about so much more of the horrors that are going on instantly, and I don't think we were made to know that. You know what I mean? Because like there were evils happening at all times.
Right.
But they didn't hear about it on social media immediately or on news, breaking news. Like now we get to hear about every single bad thing that happens from your neighborhood to across the world.
Right.
And you're like, that's not helping.
And we've only been doing that for like the start of the 21st century.
Right. And so on top of that, like he lives kind of through that generation too of like starting to get more and more information. News was a little bit slower back then than it is now, but...
Well, it's like that horrific shooting. Was it yesterday?
Yeah,
in Maine.
Yeah.
100. Let's just say 200 years ago, that something like that could have happened, right?
Right.
I mean, it could have been a mass killing, but the only people that would have known about it was in that town, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe a month later we may have found out, and word of mouth or newspapers, whatever. But nowadays everybody knows everything. But I still contend, 99.5% of the world is operating perfectly and beautifully, and flowers are growing and trees are growing and the clouds are producing rain, and everything's actually quite good, but then you get some aberration like a nutcase, going into a bowling alley and shooting a bunch of people, and that's all anybody talks about for the next 3 days.
But yeah, it's like on a wide scale, like there's nothing like bad happening to me in Irving right now in my my little city here. It's like, and that's the way it is with a lot of countries. If you look at how big just America is, like these small little cities, like you're not going to generally hear anything. Like life is peaceful and normal, but it's just these certain situations that we focus on.
Yeah, do we even need to know that happened?
Right,
I mean,
it's one of those things where, the more we know about it, the more we're just going to be like, oh, now I got to be
anxious
cautious
about it.
when I do this.
Right.
Because we were talking, some friends and I last night, don't ask me why we were talking about Jack the Ripper, but we were, and,
okay.
There's a point to the story.
Mike's on.
Jack the Ripper was a serial killer in England, and he really, this sounds really terrible, but he killed 5 people. But in the grand scheme of things, in as big of an area as London is, people wouldn't come out of their houses. They were so scared that they didn't go out of their houses for weeks, and they were terrified because this guy killed 5 people.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we gotta not... Like, because in that case, he won because you're not leaving your house. You're living in this state of fear constantly, and you can't do that.
Yeah, which ties in perfectly to what we're talking about in the program today, is that why are we so afraid? And I mean, how many times did Christ, and also, of course, John Paul II made that a big part of his pontificate, is be not afraid.
Right.
There really shouldn't be afraid of anything. But we live in a very fearful culture, okay? So Jean-Paul Sartre, kind of... epitomized the end of existentialism. I don't know of any current existentialists, and Peter Crave thinks that he was so pessimistic and so negative that he ruined existentialism. I mean, single-handedly, right?
Yeah.
But you also notice that it kind of got progressively worse. Like the first existentialist is Soren Kierkegaard, as I mentioned.
Right, and he actually still had faith, and he wasn't this downer. The whole time.
But he also wrote books called, one of his books was called Fear and Trembling. One is called The Concept of Dread. Another one is called Sickness Unto Death. And so Kierkegaard, being an existentialist, and when you focus on yourself rather than perhaps on a more broader, idea.
What's above, yeah.
Yeah, but again, he was a Christian, but he also believed he had some strange beliefs where, his hero was Abraham. Because he believed in fact, I think he coined the term leap of faith. We may have talked about this on the program before, where he didn't think that faith should be based on reason. That the more you know and the more evidence, like the proofs for the existence of God, the less meritorious it is. But he believed in this just absolute leap of faith, even if it doesn't make sense, like Abraham being asked to kill Isaac. It made no sense. It was against the moral law. It was against the natural law. But God is asking him to do that, so he's going to make the leap of faith. And he just absolutely loved that. Okay. But you can also imagine how that could create a lot of anxiety.
Right.
I mean, if you think God is telling you to, drive off a cliff or, kill your neighbor or something, or that God could ask you to do something like that, which seems so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how anxious could that make you feel like God could ask you to do something like that?
Right.
I mean, of course he did it once, but he stayed Abraham's hand. So
Right.
Anyway, so that's Kierkegaard, and
Nice fellow.
yeah. So no, but he was good. In fact, Peter Kraft says that
Very nice.
in Peter Kraft's opinion, and I love Peter Kraft, he said he was the greatest Christian writer since Augustine.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I need to read some of his stuff.
Yeah, amazing writer. In fact, if I can read the opening comments about what he said about Kierkegaard, he liked him a lot. He's often regarded as the founder of existential philosophy, and he profoundly influenced every 20th century existentialist. He says, but he is, to my mind, by far the most brilliant, Protestant thinker of all time. That's what he said. The most brilliant Protestant thinker of all time. Interestingly, his name Kierkegaard in Danish meant churchyard. Isn't that interesting?
Interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
churchyard. So it's basically like a cemetery theme there. Okay. So from Kierkegaard, we go to Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche was also an existentialist, but it's almost like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche were like polar opposites. They both believed in self-expression. They both believed in, kind of doing it your own way. But Nietzsche was an extreme atheist. In fact, he called himself the hammer. A hammer of destruction of the current order of religion and society. His goal was to destroy Christianity and usher in a new model based on the will to power and the elevation of man as the ideal rather than God, the Superman, a human form of God, dominating and surpassing himself. Okay, he called himself the Antichrist. Okay, he believed, of course, he famously said that God is dead and we have killed him. And he also wrote a book called Beyond Good and Evil, because he's like, okay, if we no longer are going to ascribe to the Christian, version of good and evil, so we got to create a new moral system. All right. So imagine taking that on and just like everything in the past
Has
is
nothing
gone.
better to do with his time, I swear.
I know. Starting a whole new system.
I swear when it comes to these kind of philosophies and concepts, it's good and evil. It's more nuanced, and I think people like him are probably like just very scared of like having to contemplate these things when there's really bad things happening in the world, but also really good things happening in the world. He's just like, let's just get rid of it. I don't even want to have to think about that.
Yeah.
He's like just it's a lot easier, quote unquote, to just strip it all away and just like do whatever than actually living in it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's almost like an excuse where you don't have to deal with the reality of the presence. You kind of destroy it all. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So here's a paragraph from Dr. Peter Kraft. He says, the consequences of the death of God, according to Nietzsche, go far beyond religion. They include the death of objective truth, which Nietzsche would likely say is only God without a face. He famously wrote, there are no facts, only interpretations. Okay, think about that. There are no facts, only interpretations. Most especially, there are no objective values or ends or goods. And therefore, if there are no objective goods, there are no objective evils. As Dostoevsky said, if God does not exist, then everything is permissible. There is, in fact, no being, no logos, nothing that withstands or resists the hermeneutic of suspicion. And then interesting, he said Picasso drew the consequence of this in his postmodernism painting. Giacometti, I never heard of him, in sculpture, Schoenberg and John Cage in music, chaos replaces cosmos. Not only is Exodus 20, the Ten Commandments, and the order of human life, but also Genesis 1, the order of the cosmos becomes undone. The sweater unravels into a tangle of yarn. So you see what he's doing here. He's taking order and he's taking a structure and everything that the whole world had basically been the basis of Judeo-Christian beliefs and ideals for thousands of years, and he single-handedly wants to upturn the whole thing and start over. With man replacing God, the Superman, and God is dead, and everything that Christianity represents has got to be overturned. That's a little problematic when you say.
I would say so. Yeah, it's kind of
okay. So you can see where he would have an influence on a guy like Jean-Paul Sartre. I mean, and then you get all the problems in the culture.
Yeah, we see it like all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, if you're out there and you're listening or watching, and you have any comments, let us know who you are, and if you have any questions, or if this makes any sense, or maybe you can tie in some of the problems going on in the culture to these existential philosophers. And so the last one we'll talk about is Martin Heidegger. And Heidegger, as I mentioned, was a really, really influential existentialist philosopher. Peter Crave says he is the most profound philosopher of the century, perhaps of all time. No 20th century thinker has been more influential among continental philosophers. The first single question that haunted all of his writings is, what is being? Okay, and in the Introduction to Metaphysics, the fundamental question of metaphysics, he said, why are there beings at all instead of nothing? That is the question. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and asked yourself that question? Why is there something rather than nothing? Okay, this is what
all
kept
the time, man.
This is what kept Martin Heidegger up at night.
I swear people just need to do more things.
You get more hobbies or something?
Yeah, get a hobby. Just start going and helping people, clean people's houses for them. Do something.
Yeah. So here he is. He's an existentialist. He wants to know, why do things exist? What is being? What is existence? So he says, and this is his own writing, he says, the question is there in a spell of boredom, when we are equally distant from despair and joy, but when the stubborn ordinariness of being lays open a wasteland in which it makes no difference to us whether beings are or not. And then in a distinctive form, the question resonates once again. Why are there beings at all rather than nothing? And when we ask about being, we are now asking about something that we hardly grasp, something that is now no more than the sound of a word to us, that puts us in danger of falling victim to the mere idolization of words. Okay, so again, he had no religious background, he had no belief in God, and so he was not able to put this in any kind of a context. Okay, but he was an interesting writer. But so that Kierkegaard to Nietzsche to Heidegger to Sartre, and it all kind of unravels, and you get to the end where Sartre basically said, Heidegger wrote a book called Being in Time, and Sartre wrote a book called Being in Nothingness. Okay, so he turned around and just said basically, there's nothing.
He must have been such an entertaining coffee appointment, just like having a chat over coffee. You're just trying to, I'm enjoying my day, I'm enjoying my coffee, and he'd be like, by the way, none of this matters. It just. Oh,
you know what they said? Interestingly,
really?
I mean, Peter Crave relates the story is that people would be in a room talking like to Sartre, and Sartre would just talk, right? And if the person left the room, he didn't stop. He just kept talking. The point being is that I'm not really talking to you. I'm talking to myself. And so he had such little regard for any person that he wouldn't even acknowledge that the person walked out of the room, because it's almost like, who cares? I don't care if you were here in the first place, I mean, this is who he was.
Would he have been insulted if we burned his books?
No, he wouldn't care, because you determine what you want to do. So remember, there's no rules.
So why did he write? Why did he do anything?
That's a good point, right?
Why was
what's
he putting
the
all
point?
this effort into writing about life being about nothing if we could just disregard everything that he wrote?
I mean, if it's all subjective, why not?
Yeah, and why would he have to instruct somebody if they're making up their own reality?
Right, why bother wasting your time writing a book?
Right.
Writing a book. No, I mean that in the word of writing a book that I'm assuming he hoped people would read it and believe it.
I think he would say, I'm here. I mean, life was a total drudgery. But I guess the bigger question is, why was he so popular, especially with women? Why would women love this physically ugly, hateful guy?
Someone who's so negative. Why does he influence the culture?
I have found that like people today, because he definitely probably influenced a lot. There's a lot of dark humor nowadays. There's a lot of like sarcastic humor in like the generation. It's very like angsty, very, like life sucks kind of, those sort of things. And it probably comes down from him to an extent. But I do find that the guys who like are super, super making those kind of dark jokes and stuff like that, girls do tend to be attracted to. And it's weird. And it's I'm not saying like I will make a slightly dark joke occasionally time to time, but like nothing to the extent of what people do. So it's interesting because
they're kind of attracted to the gloominess.
To the gloom, because everyone has gloomy days. We all understand that, and so I think sometimes people like to lean into the sorrow, the sadness, the tough times, and just be like, I'm just gonna wallow in this, rather than, again, it takes a lot more courage to actually stand up and be like, no, I'm not gonna live life like it's that horrible, because we have the beauty and the truth and the goodness of God. So if you're aware of that, you can look to that.
And as I mentioned before, to put it in the context of the time, and the dropping of the bomb and the Vietnam War and the hippie generation and free love and all that kind of stuff. Although I'm not sure which influenced which more, but imagine if, like right now, as William was alluding to earlier, we have a certain telos, we're kind of built for happiness. The culture had always said we're built to unite with God, okay? And this is very, very Thomistic. This is classic Aristotelian Thomistic, teleology, is that we have a certain nature. It's like a bird has a nature, and so a bird that's like not flying, you would say it doesn't seem to be fulfilling its nature, right? Or a fish that is not able to swim, or so they're built a certain way in a certain and there's a certain direction that they're kind of being pushed towards. But if you want to like say there's no God, there's a certain, because Sartre wrote a lot about freedom, and then that gives you a certain humanistic kind of freedom that I can create myself into the image of whatever I want. It's a burden. Yeah, and so but then that was the anxiety, okay?
Yeah, because you're just like, I got to come up with everything. I've got to, and it's. There's problems in the world always. If you sit and contemplate those for too long, sometimes you're wondering like, oh, why is all this hurt, or all this division within whatever it may be. But like, we're not meant to like sit there going like, let me fix this.
And he did acknowledge that it was very anxiety ridden. Okay, and he even he said it's like standing on the edge of a cliff and knowing that you can jump off. And it makes you nervous because you have the freedom to do that. Okay, so you have the freedom in Sartre's mind to do whatever you want with yourself. And that's scary because...
What if he was in therapy?
Well, he's a weird guy.
I'm just saying, because like some of the stuff that he's saying almost sounds like OCD tendencies, or just things of like that anxiety of... Because I have friends who have pretty bad OCD, and they have this thing of like... when you have that intrusive thought of, what if I just threw myself, like you're driving, like, what if I just like, jerk the wheel? Like everyone has that, right? OCD is when it gets stuck in your brain and it keeps you ruminate. And then my friend will sometimes call me and she's like, so I know I didn't hit somebody, but in my head, I just keep picturing I hit somebody. So it's like stuck in that. And he's giving me these vibes of just that anxiety of, and so I'm like, you need therapy in Jesus.
You could do a lot of things.
You could do a lot of things, and you can get very obsessive about it. And so he built himself this little world that let him ruminate in that.
And you think about the guy in Connecticut, and goes, I don't even know what's in his mind, but
Maine?
I'm sorry, Maine, where maybe in his twisted mind he's thinking, I could do this, maybe, then he gets pushed over the edge, saying, I have the power and I'm able to do this, and so you just don't know what kind of influence something like this has. But okay, so I want to end before we go to the trivia on a positive note and say, how do we rid this? Pope Leo XIII said in Aeterni Patris, the restoration of Christian philosophy according to the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas. And I have my own thoughts because I think the root of existentialism precedes existentialism. I think existentialism was influenced by previous philosophers.
Yes.
But and that's one of my life works, is to try to kind of piece this together to see how this kind of flow all came together to get us where we are today. But any thoughts before I give you my 2 cents?
As in regards to the question, I think it's pretty simple. Like, just go back to tradition. Like, go back to the way it was before we kind of went crazy. Like, it now, is that practical? Probably not, because we're at a time when we have lots of technology. Like, no one's like, let's go back to the Middle Ages or whatever. Let's go back to monarchy or what have you. It's probably not practical, but as a principle, if you wanna at least try to attempt to rid yourself of this modern existential individualist philosophy that's kind of ruining society, go back to something that was better, at least as far as faith and morals goes, than what we have now. We can sacrifice things we have now for something that's going to be better in the long run.
Oh, that was a thoughtful answer. Yeah, very good. Cecil, beat that.
Dang, I should have gone first, but I wouldn't have been a letdown no matter what I say. I don't know. It's so funny. Every time we learn about these different philosophers, we learn a little bit about their life, and obviously they have massive influence on our culture today. But I always just think, I just feel and pray for them because of like the mindset that they were in, just because I do, there's something that obviously that triggers this and goes down, and I don't know. But I would say that I think sometimes we get a little bit caught up in very, very big picture, when sometimes God just wants us to take things day by day, and we are all given vocations, and we have things that right in front of us that we're supposed to be taking care of. Whether it be our families, our community, and obviously first and foremost, our devotion to God. So like starting very simply to get out of this anxious cycle is work on the things that God has put in front of you. Maybe, yes, are there terrible things happening? Are there people dying? Is there persecution across the world? Yeah, absolutely. But like first and foremost, am I serving my family the way that God has asked me to?
Yeah, well, very good. I think both of those are very good, and I think you got to go back to Immanuel Kant, the Copernican revolution in philosophy, where instead of the traditional idea would be that we discover truth in the world, and that the truth is first of all in the mind of God, and then the world participates in the beauty and truth of God, and then we go and we discover it. And then Immanuel Kant came along with his revolution and said, no, we actually impose categories on the world, and so that the truth begins with us and the world conforms to our mind. Okay, right. That by its very nature is turning things around to the individual rather than the individual seeking the God. So I have been thinking a lot about just kind of the momentary realization of being able to discover God in the world and discover his greatness, and kind of more like living in the moment. And when you see a human person, being able to understand that this is a creature that's made in the image and likeness of God, and internalizing that, training your mind to be able to see the world differently, and to basically come to see and understand God in our everyday experience, right? And I think you gotta throw out a whole lot of bad philosophy and a lot of bad training that the culture's gotten into, because the culture just isn't thinking that way. We're not seeking God in every day. Yeah, you might go to Mass and you receive the Eucharist, which is, of course, a wonderful thing to do. But as far as day-to-day, moment-to-moment thought process, and this is what I've been thinking about a lot lately, and all that. So
I like what you said about Immanuel Kant, and I'd agree, because that's when you're imposing yourself on the object instead of looking towards God, Yeah, that'll do it. What do you expect from the modern ones if they're going to take it?
You can see where Kant would lead to Nietzsche.
Exactly.
Because Nietzsche wants to elevate man, and Kant, even though he was a Christian at least nominally, and never denied the existence of God, and actually had a pretty good ethical system based on the dignity of the human person. Interestingly, but he did turn epistemology around so that we are in control. Okay, we're imposing the world, and the world is conforming to us rather than us to the world. And you can see where that could directly through a line of succession lead to somebody like Jean-Paul Sartre, where he's creating himself, and now you got people thinking they're animals, and people thinking thinking they're women, and vice versa.
Exactly.
So it gets a little nutty. Okay?
I'm not gonna lie, Dave. I think we lost everybody today.
Oh, really? Too deep, or what?
No, I mean, we have people watching. I mean, you're out there. Hello, thank you for joining us. But I think everyone's just so having to take it all in.
Yeah.
So there are actually people out there watching.
Well, I mean, the numbers say that there are people watching. No one's commented though.
Nobody's commented. Okay, if you are out there, please comment. We want to know that you're there. And what did you think about this? Was it too deep? Was it interesting? Was it not interesting? Was it like, let's move on to something else? And I want to know what you think right now. Okay, so let us know. Don't be shy. And we're going to move on now to something very, very light. Okay, we're going to do.
This is when everyone's going to jump in.
Everybody's going to jump in and say, "Okay, they're finished with the philosophy. Now they're doing the game. I'm going to jump in." Okay.
One more thing, real fast.
Yeah.
I think the moral we can take away from today's discussion is that philosophy is indeed powerful.
Oh,
very powerful.
Yeah,
even if you
it
don't
can
realize
influence
it.
everything.
Even if you don't even realize it.
Yeah. And that's it's kind of hard to quantify or prove, but I think you can see the trends. And again, like I think I mentioned before, is the philosophers tend to be really popular among the academia, and they tend to be the influencers because these professors, especially at these public universities who are big fans of Jean-Paul Sartre and Nietzsche and Marx, they are educating the future business leaders, the future, leaders of media. And so it really,
they have a big influence,
huge influence. And that's why I think the homeschooling, like we talked about earlier, is a really important thing. Because I think you can insulate. I think you could be sent to the worst school in America and have the most insidious, horrible professors. And I would bet 4 years later, you have not lost your faith.
I'd hope so. Yeah, pray so.
Yeah, with God's grace.
Yes, of course.
I think, well, why? Because you were brought up by good parents. You went to a good parish. You sat in on, Back to the Father for a couple of years.
Definitely cite Back to the Father.
Learn my stuff. Yeah.
So
early on.
But I think it comes down to parents instilling the truth in their kids.
Absolutely.
Because I think, of course, there's no guarantees, but I think that you can protect and insulate your kids from this nonsense if you teach them at a young age, the truth. And so that's what we need to do. All right. So I think we've definitely proven that there's nobody out there watching this right now. Okay. But if you're watching this on a recorded basis, okay, that's okay.
Congrats, you made it through
you can comment as well. All right. I have here in my hand, James, do you want to play or are we just going to have Sissel and William play? Okay. James can turn on his mic. We'll let him play as well. Okay.
I'll join in.
All right.
Okay. So we're going to go, these are 15, according to a website search I did, okay? 15 popular ways that people reduce anxiety.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, 15, and of course, there's no right or wrong, but these are the 15. Now, there actually were 16, but one of them...
How specific are we?
One of them is yoga, and I'm going to take that one off. Take that one off the list, okay? So I took off the yoga one, so now we're down to 15. Okay. And James, you get to guess one first and see if you just say one way, the popular ways that people reduce anxiety, and then you got 10 seconds, and then it goes to Sissel and then William.
One way to reduce anxiety, I would say exercising.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
that was the first one. Okay, so James, got the first one.
Is it me next?
Yeah, Sissel.
Meditation.
Let's see.
Or they count that with yoga.
Hold on. We're going to go ahead and take mindfulness.
Yeah.
Practicing
I think,
mindfulness. Okay, we're going to give that one to Sissel, okay? Let's see. Okay.
I was gonna say meditation too,
Yeah.
but we just got that one.
Yeah,
so,
that one's taken. Ways to reduce anxiety. You have 10 seconds.
I don't think I have any idea.
Oh, boy.
No.
This is not. Maybe the other ones will inspire you. Okay, James, back to you.
Okay.
You're tied with Sissel.
Another one would be hanging out with your family and friends.
Oh, wow. Let's see. That should be on there if it isn't. Spend time with friends and family.
Good
There you
job,
go,
James.
James.
Question. This was written recently, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining something like stepping away from like electronics and phone and like stuff like that.
Minimize
Yes.
phone use and screen time. Very good. Okay. So, William, have you been inspired?
Like just a tiny bit.
Okay.
I don't, based off what's been said on the list so far, I don't know if this would count or be on the list, but
A lot of qualifiers here.
yeah, but it's ways to relieve anxiety or stress.
Yes.
Okay. Could we say like drug medication?
Ooh.
Would that be on the list?
I am going to accept supplements.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. William is on the board. It's 2 for James. James, you've been pretty impressive. I'm very impressed with this. What's your next one?
Next one would be, I would say art, like painting.
Ooh, doing something creative, a hobby or something like that.
I like that. Let me see if
If there's a hobby, I say that should count.
Okay, we're gonna. This one may be a stretch, but we're gonna do it. Journaling. Okay, so it's close enough. Okay. Sometimes people draw when they journal, right?
Yeah.
They draw little pictures and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Okay.
for
So
sure.
all right. So James is 3 for 3.
Trying to think. Is it something like some sort of breathing exercises or something like that?
Deep breathing.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh wow. I'm so impressed. William. I'm kind of impressed with you. Not entirely, but you're getting better. 3 for James, 3 for Sissel, 1 for William.
The holiday season, because can that count?
It's just like,
Like
that you
that's-
get the
Like
warm
what if
fuzzies.
you're stressed out in like June? What are you gonna do?
You're stuck.
Like,
You gotta wait for another 6 months, man.
suck
You
it up
can't
for
do
5 months or what?
anything.
Okay, no, that's no,
Didn't think
okay,
so.
Sorry, James.
Oh,
I
just
what,
thought of
what, if,
really
what, if, what
obvious-
if James beats Sissel? Wouldn't this be awesome?
That's never gonna happen. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, James.
Another way to relieve anxiety. I would say pray to Jesus.
There you
Okay.
go.
And interestingly, prayer is not on here.
I'm not honestly surprised. Unfortunately,
but this was a secular thing. But I'm sorry, I can't give you. But it's obviously
That
really,
should be
really
one
it
of
should
those.
be, but it's not.
This is really stupid. I can't believe neither of us said this. Therapy. Going to see a counselor or something like
let's
that.
See. Actually, no.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it should be.
Can I change my answer?
No, again, these are just 15 according to this one. So, William, back to you.
Okay. How many more do we have, by the way?
About 7.
Oh gosh. Okay.
I have another idea. I'm ready.
And then some of these are a little outside the box.
Okay. Okay.
Some of them are more obvious.
Okay.
There's still some obvious
oh,
ones
like
left.
fidgeting.
Fidget toys?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
those.
saying-
fidget
is that one of
toys.
them?
No, that's not on there.
Oh. That's
Nope,
unfortunate.
not on there. James, back to you.
I guess cracking jokes with your friends.
Yeah, that's kind of like spending time with your friends and family. I think that would, so that's already taken. So, sorry.
I'm going to say either something about caffeine or and
good.
food and diet.
Reduce caffeine intake. Okay, we're
Oh,
going to
okay.
take that one. Okay, so very good. Very
All
good.
right.
Probably not, but reading. Is that?
It should be.
I mean, writing was, but not.
Yeah, no, sorry.
it's not.
Sorry,
Okay.
but
That's
that's
sad.
good. James?
Getting more sleep.
Ooh.
Whoa, I'm
That's
gonna put that under practice self-care.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, self-care, more sleep. So now we're down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Hold on. I'm trying to think if this is like really good or a really bad one. Cuddling with my doggy.
Cuddling is on there.
Cuddling?
Yes.
But not with my dog, just cuddling.
Well, I'm just gonna say cuddling is on there. Okay. Let's just.
Suspicious.
I'll explain later. Okay. Cuddling is on there. Okay. And it's kind of like Sissel could have had 2 there, but
Okay,
that
you
would
know what? Stop
combine.
giving away answer.
And you've actually done that twice.
Oh, have I?
Yeah. So I don't want them to think it's already taken. Okay. So William obviously didn't get that.
No.
The very clear hint. that,
Well, no, I'm
As he
thinking about
continues to-
I'm thinking about it. I got the hint. I'm just not
He's
sure
confused.
what the answer is. Yeah, a little bit.
So James has 4. Sissel has 5. William has 1. Okay.
We got friendship right.
Yeah,
already.
we already
Okay.
did. Yeah, we got
That's what I
friends.
thought. That's what I thought.
I'm not supposed to getting a bunch of money.
Did I say something
suddenly.
about 10? Winning the lottery? I think that could increase.
That would increase. Not winning the lottery, but
So
just-
time's up.
Yeah.
James,
All
your
right.
turn.
Another way to relieve
Everybody gets one more guess.
anxiety. I would say watching your favorite TVs and movie.
That should be on there. But
But it's not.
it's not.
Okay, so you said that. So can I do 2 because you said that I've twice now given possibilities. So I think obviously animal, something about like doing
Okay,
something with
spending
your,
time with a pet.
and then was it food like your diet?
Eating a balanced diet, yes. Okay, so Sissel is once again dominating. Okay. William, do you want to try another one or just
How many
give
more
me-
do we have? 3?
There's 1,
How
2.
obvious are these last ones?
One's like oh, and then 2
Taking a nap.
are no. Yeah. That'd be, I think
It
that,
should be.
I think that'd be self-care,
should be.
right? Isn't what we got?
Oh, go on a shopping spree. No.
Okay, so
Oh, is it something about like
the
your
most-
relationships, managing relationships better?
well, close. Create boundaries and learn to say no.
Oh,
Okay, because wouldn't you agree? A lot of
Yeah.
stress is because we
Because
don't
we keep
say
saying
no.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I have time for this. Yes, I can do this. And then
Yeah,
you're like,
that doesn't happen in your life, does
never,
it? No.
ever.
Like, yes, I can write a book. Okay, avoid procrastination.
Speaking of the
that's
book.
a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's 2 in 1 right there, Sissel. And then the final one is one you guys probably should have gotten. I think it's kind of,
Was this
Don't
the
be
obvious
anxious.
one?
Just
no,
don't.
spending time in nature.
Duh.
Did anybody say taking
We
a
said
walk?
exercising, so I think I
We
equated
did,
that
yeah.
with like
But
walking.
exercise could be like
Yeah, but-
Gold's Gym. I mean, that's
No,
not in nature.
there's nothing not anxiety inducing about going to a gym.
Yeah, that's anxious.
I find that anxiety
Because like
inducing.
everybody's looking at each other.
Yeah, and I don't know what the heck this stupid equipment's supposed to do.
Yeah, right.
So that's why I go on walks instead.
So, boy, that made you anxious, didn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for watching and participating in Back to the Father. We're glad you're here. We'll be here next week, God willing. Are we here next week? Yeah, I think so. Two weeks in
2
a
weeks
row,
in
right?
a row. What?
Oh, wow.
That's a first.
Yeah. All right. God bless you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday for Back to the Father.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.